On April 9th, 1939, Easter Sunday, as the United States was emerging from the Great Depression, and fewer than 5 months prior to the fermenting seeds of hate openly blossoming into the vile fruit of World War II in Europe, Marian Anderson sang on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Anderson was born in Philadelphia, a city that, amongst other significant events of the American Revolution, hosted the First and Second Continental Congress, and was the site of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The litany of adversity she endured in her formative years merits further discussion. Childhood poverty, the death of her father and her grandfather while Anderson was a teenager, both of whom she was quite close to. Systemic racial discrimination that was both personally abasing and detrimental to her education and training, all in addition to the quotidian, regular racism endured by a black person born in this country in 1897. But, amidst all of this, Anderson sang. She first cultivated her skills by singing and performing in her local Baptist church, and through her persistence and passion, rose to the status of one of the preeminent classical performers of her era. In the 1930s, she toured Europe extensively, performing in world capitals, befriending the composer Jean Sibelius, and receiving high praise from the conductor Arturo Toscanini. She met no less critical acclaim in her native land, though this was certainly soured by the pernicious Jim Crow laws that were indiscriminate only in that their reach even extended to someone of her stature. Anderson had initially planned to sing at Constitution Hall in D.C. that Easter Sunday, but the hall, operated by the Daughters of the American Revolution, or the DAR, strictly enforced a whites-only practice. As a result, a cohort consisting of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, herself one of many outraged members of the DAR, representatives of the NAACP, and Anderson's manager persuaded Secretary of the Interior Harold Ickes to host the performance at the Lincoln Memorial. And there, Marian Anderson sang. She sang in front of the monument to Lincoln, the wrenchingly flawed, complex, and principled Lincoln, whose singular abilities saw our country through its most trying period of division, whose undying insistence on the importance of the people is inscribed in his Gettysburg Address inside the monument, and whose Emancipation Proclamation freed the grandfather Anderson lived with following her father's early death at the age of 37. She sang on the steps where, 24 years later, Martin Luther King Jr., the Baptist preacher who, like Lincoln, had a wrenchingly flawed, complex, and principled character, expounded on his dream, his fervent and morally sound desire to have people judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. She sang to a 75,000 person strong mixed race crowd in a city and a country that were segregated under the cruel joke of Plessy v. Ferguson, an insidious piece of recidivist legislation representative of the post-Reconstruction era. And she sang of my country, asserting, as a black woman, as much ownership of it and stake in it as any other human being. And she sang of a sweet land of liberty, her anguished, ardent desire overcoming the staid expression on her face as she drew her closed hands up from her lap toward her heart. And she sang of the land where her fathers died, land they worked for no just recompense, and in which they were buried as property, not as men. And she sang of freedom. I hope today that we take time not just to recognize the positive contributions of the founding fathers, but to the uncountable and often unknowable others who fought and are still fighting for freedom. Freedom from all forms of tyranny, forms of injustice, hatred, discrimination, and oppression. Those who extend that fight beyond the mere borders of our country on behalf of all our fellow members of humankind.